Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explain series. So I was very happy to see the responses in the comments section with regards to the question yesterday. Some of you got it wrong, some of you got it correct. It is named after Edward Jenner, father of immunology, and he was the founder or inventor of the vaccine for smallpox. Smallpox, he stated to have saved more human lives than any other human on the earth. So it's also fitting that for a pandemic in our current times, it is their institution their that institution's vaccine is also proving to be life-saving for all of us. Hopefully, we get the vaccine soon for all. And now, with regards to the other comments, so I diligently always check up the comments overnight and then in the morning before we do the recording. So if you have any doubts, feel free to put them up till the morning hours, and even then you can just highlight it in the previous, we'll check them out. Okay, so don't worry. Now with regards to the doubts yesterday, so a lot of students had doubts with the banking thing. Don't worry, I'll explain that today. Then there were two other doubts with regards to the conflict in Middle East. So yesterday I had talked about, there is this news that the Prime Minister of Israel and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia met while Mike Pompeo was on the visit to Saudi Arabia. So that is a story, has not been confirmed. Okay, there is speculation, there is reports that it happened, but there is no conclusive proof. Also, there is no conclusive proof whether Saudi Arabia has actually decided to normalize its relationship with Israel. So once that thing is in place, don't worry, we will cover the conflict of Saudi Arabia and Israel, and we'll go in depth of all of that. So wait for it. Until it's not confirmed, speculation is not relevant from CLAT perspective. Then with regards to information, what becomes relevant? Okay, there students have been asking regularly whether from the month of November it becomes relevant or not. See, CLAT does not highlight from what month it becomes relevant for their exam. Okay, there is no specific date that they set, but the earlier you begin, the better, and this series is going to help you with that. Because we will be covering the past of different stories, the present and the future, and how it relates to all three limbs of your examination. So don't worry, follow the series. Then there is another question that some students have, that after they have watched the video, do they need to read the newspaper? So with regards to news articles and concepts, I don't think you need to read the newspaper. Now with regards to editorials, the reason why you should read the relevant editorials that I tell you, or I state that, see, this editorial is relevant for us, we cover it, because you should read that editorial. They are freely available on the Hindu website and the Hindu app. So even if you don't have subscription to the Hindu e-paper or or bought the newspaper, don't worry, the editorials become freely available, if not on the same day, the next day. But the app provides them in the morning itself, so don't worry, you do read the editorial which I say is relevant. Don't read the other editorials, they are not relevant from your examination point of view. Okay, so that is what I suggest, that see, after you have watched, I have told you these editorials become relevant, then read the editorial, put your doubts in the comment section, and then I will address them on the next day. Now moving on with regards to today's newspaper. So today it's a light day for you all, that there is not much content. So but there is a tropical cyclone that is developing in the Bay of Bengal. It is named Nivar. Okay, so we'll discuss this a little bit, and then on the other news on the front page is about efficacy of the Sputnik vaccine. And now that vaccine efficacy has been confirmed, there is now clamor and policy deliberations happening as to how will we distribute it. So that is something we'll have to keep in mind now. Now moving on, there is political news. There is news that with regards to the new parliament building that is being developed by the year 2022. So Mahatma Gandhi's 16-foot statue that is right in front of the Parliament House will be relocated. That is the news. And then on the right hand side is the news that, see, there were trees that are being transplanted, but they are beyond what was actually permitted. So it's a developing story, nothing of that sort, just elaborating it for you all. More news with regards to COVID only. What should be opened, what is your standard, what are you doing for it, different chief ministers highlighting their preparedness. And then on the editorial page, okay. So with regards to editorials today, there is not much specifically for us, okay. On the left hand side, the diplomatic offensive, it's about India briefing different ambassadors of different countries, telling them, see, Pakistan is doing all this. This plot was based out of a terrorist outfit based in Pakistan. Remember, recently Prime Minister Narendra Modi had also tweeted Jaish-e-Mohammed's attempt to recreate a Pulwama type attack to mark the anniversary of 26/11 terror attacks. So that plan was voided by the security forces, which is a great thing. They have learned their lesson. They have upped their guard. They have learned the game that these terror outfits play. So this editorial is just stating us that, see, this is the thing that India needs to keep on doing to establish. Remember, the Financial Action Task Force meeting happens in February. For more international pressure needs to be added on such states that sponsor terrorism. So that is the editorial. On the left hand side, it's a dangerous suggestion. Industrial houses should not have access to household savings through their own banks. This is, again, the main editorial also talks about the same thing. That, see, for the past 2 days, this has been in news that banks, an internal working group of the RBI has stated that corporate houses should be permitted to open their own banks. That is the real news. It's something considered as a reform or trying to infuse more capital. Now, this is deep into economic policy. It's not something that has been specifically done. So that is why this entire discussion of linking what are the lapses, what will happen, or the other editorial, now they don't become relevant from CLAT perspective. Even if a lot of time in the newspaper is being dedicated to it, from a CLAT point of view, from the exam point of view, these two stories don't become relevant, okay. The things that become relevant from this story is the role of RBI, the role of what is privatization, disinvestment, because they are linked with foreign direct investment in the Indian economy. So those concepts become important, and day-to-day basis we'll be discussing them. For example, today I will be telling you the difference between private banks and public sector banks and what is this process of privatization and disinvestment. Something we had done yesterday, I will be doing it again. Then is the article linking how migrants were denied their rights and there is a need to bridge the social distance between the urban classes and the migrant dwellers that live in urban areas. So not relevant from CLAT perspective at all. Then are two editorials about the policy of love jihad that is now in news, that this is all fabrication. It is an attack on people wanting to love each other. There is a presumption that particular religion professes to be terrorism or sponsors of terrorism. It is to portray them as enemies and one as safe. So all that political narrative by one party over the other, nothing relevant from academic point of view. Remember, see, CLAT, I keep on saying this, that CLAT is an academic exam. All of you aspire to be academicians, lawyers. The point of view is the nature of the examination is something related to your professional skills that you will be expected post or once you are at a national law university, which is that you have to go beyond the politics. These are political narratives that one party builds over another, okay. In this editorial, there are two cases that are highlighted: Noor Jahan Begum versus State of UP and Salmat Ansari versus State of UP. That say that remember that individual is more important, and we'll cover these two cases today. Okay, I'll just highlight the concept of Article 21. All this narrative, what you need to move beyond is see the law behind this. What are the principles of individual rights that become relevant? Okay. Now, on the left hand side is the Forest Rights Act of Jammu and Kashmir. This is about, see, Forest Rights Act 2006 was about recognizing the rights of forest dwellers on the goods and resources within the forest. That there are certain communities, tribals, who rely on forest goods for their day-to-day livelihood plus some commercial activities. And forests don't just belong to the nature, they also, human beings can live in cohabitation with wild animals or the natural ecosystem of forest, and they have certain real rights over that. Okay, now Moving on the political front, there is nothing of relevance for us. National news front, okay, nothing specific. There is one news that this one is what we'll be discussing. Poshan Abhiyaan needs a boost. Now this is relevant in the sense of Sustainable Development Goals, National Health Mission, and because COVID is a health crisis, concepts related to health become important. What is health? Yesterday we discussed the concept of One Health. Now today this is a survey about stunting and child wasting. Now these are things related to hunger. Now that is why all these things become relevant for us, that these principles, okay. Now then there is the news of Sputnik 5 showing interim efficacy of 91%. Again, the vaccine, we have discussed Sputnik vaccine. Yesterday's video had the link to when we had explained this entire vaccine structure. So if you haven't watched this, watch that. Please first check that out, okay. Now, moving on, we'll be discussing the Allahabad High Court judgment with regards to individual rights, and then I'll be covering those two cases that I mentioned. Then on the sporting front, there is one news that we'll discuss today. On the international level and economic level, there is nothing specific for us. So let's dive in. The first is the news regarding the cyclone, okay. So again, I'll have a question for you that I want to see your responses in the comment section, because the cyclone will hit today and then the story will develop what is the category of the cyclone. So we'll be discussing tropical cyclones tomorrow in depth, but before that I'll give you a precursor and a question for you all. The first thing is, see, today we'll just discuss the nomenclature. So the name of the cyclone that is about to hit Tamil Nadu from Bay of Bengal is Nivar. Now, what are the organizations that decide the name? The World Meteorological Organization and the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, ESCAP, ESCAP. Now they arrive at a name, okay, countries submit, and then they submit their names, suggestions to panel on tropical cyclones, okay. The different countries that are there in this, they submit it, and then the list is prepared. So the question for you all is, which country suggested the name Nivar to the panel of tropical cyclones? This is the question. I will be answering it tomorrow. Nevertheless, I will also be covering how other countries arrive at name, what is the why certain things, why cyclones are named in the way they are, and different cyclones that hit India also. Tomorrow we'll be discussing that, but the question for you all is, which country suggested the name Nivar to the panel on tropical cyclones? A brief hint that, see, countries on the Southeast Asian region surrounding Bay of Bengal are the ones that submitted. So keep an eye on that, okay. Now moving on to the next news on the sporting front. ICC's award categories have been announced, nominees for those award categories. There are particular Indians who are also there, so that is why this becomes relevant. Once the awards are finally announced, we'll discuss the history of the awards, but today we'll discuss the nominees, okay. So the player of the decade in the men's category, Virat Kohli is the Indian there. Now remember, this is the same decade in which India won the World Cup under MS Dhoni. There were other Indian players, and Dhoni had also led us to semi-final and in 2015 and a Champions Trophy win in England. But you see that when nominees for awards are announced, it becomes more construed to people who are active now. So for example, the award is getting announced in 2020. It's more likely that most of the nominees will be someone who have been recently active, okay. So that is why, let's say, in the award for the decade, it's Virat Kohli from India. Then in the women's category, Mithali Raj, female Indian cricketer, is there. ODI player of the decade, Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, MS Dhoni, Julan Goswami and Mithali Raj. 3 men and 2 women cricketers of India. Then test player of the decade, Virat Kohli is the only player there. Okay, T20 player of the decade, Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma are the Indian nominees. And then ICC Cricket of the Spirit Award of the decade, Virat Kohli and MS Dhoni feature in this award nominations. Okay, so once awards are finally announced, we'll discuss it. Now is a little bit update with regards to the crisis in Ethiopia. Okay, now as I told you that TPLF has been given an ultimatum by the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed. The ultimatum now, TPLF has responded that see, we are not going to surrender, we are going to fight till our last bit. Their leader Debre Debretsion Gebre Michael, okay, Debretsion Gebre Michael, he is the leader of the TPLF. He has stated that they are not going to vacate. We have discussed the crisis in depth in past two videos. We'll provide the links to them in the description, so don't worry if you haven't, do check them out. Now the capital of Mekele, which is the Tigray region's capital city, has been surrounded by the Ethiopian forces. They have given a 72-hour surrender notice, that surrender, so that hostilities can end and there is no need for people to be attacked. One side, the other side of the story is Ethiopian forces are saying that they'll bombard each and every house of the city to get TPLF out until they surrender. So now other Ethiopian people of Ethiopia only who live in the Tigray region have been given that see, liberate the city, move out of it, because a war is going to happen there. Now that is a reason of humanitarian law, international humanitarian law violation. Humanitarian law is basically the laws for the wars, that there are certain rules that you need to follow even when you're in a conflict situation. So once this crisis leads to a conclusion, hopefully it does in a peaceful manner, we'll keep an eye on that. One lesson that we need to learn from this situation is that see, peaceful transition of power is the only long-term sustainable method. Ethiopia got its freedom from the military and the democratic transition from colonial masters to military. Then military was overthrown by militia groups who also claimed democracy. But for India, we got it peacefully, peaceful transition of power. It was always a democratic government, unlike, let's say, Pakistan or these other countries. So non-violence is the only way, and that is why Mahatma Gandhi is considered to be a pioneer in that, okay? And his legacy lives on. Now, with the Poshan Abhiyaan, certain things that I will be highlighting. So what does the survey says? That see, there is still a high number of children who are suffering, children under 5 years who are stunted. Height for age. Stunting is children who are on average should retain that much level of height are unable to do so because of lower nutrition level. Now 38.4% of children are there. Then children who are wasted, that children who have malnutrition, now even if you put more nutrition than them, their bodies will not be on the level of an average human being, like a healthy average human being. 21% of children are there. Now there is a spike rise in this, okay, in the fourth survey. Why is this? This is the National Family Health Survey. Why is there? The data is from 2015 to 2016. So it is saying that see, there is a little bit of spike with regards to children's health, and that is why we need to work more on the Poshan Abhiyaan or the National Nutrition Mission, that we need to work on improving the health of the children and working to give them a more nutritious diet, okay, that just by giving them wheat or rice may fulfill their stomachs for that day, but that doesn't provide them all the nutritions they need. So that is why this program is also important for the wholesome growth of a child. Now, how is this linked to the sustainable development goals? I am going to tell you. Goal 1, 2 and 3, they become a part of that, okay. First is poverty. Only when you are poor, you are unable to afford nutritious food, so poverty becomes important. Zero hunger. How will you become anemic, malnutritioned or stunted or wasted? Because you don't have enough food in your belly. And then good health, the third sustainable development goal. When you can't fulfill your basic food needs, you will not be able to develop immunity, you will not be your long-term livelihood will get hampered, and that is the concept of good health. So these things also get affected. The idea of sustainable development goals is by 2030 we'll be able to eliminate all of that and provide every human being with good health. So we are still far away from it, and a lot of work needs to be done by all of us. Now moving on, the Allahabad High Court gave a judgment yesterday in a case which was supposed to be in around the political narrative of love jihad, that this girl got married, she was forced, and it was against her will. Her father had filed the complaint that, see, my daughter against her own will, and it is a violation under the POSCO law that she's been now harassed. So all of that was stated. The High Court came together and say that, see, if law permits two people of the same sex also to live together, no one can object to relationship of two adults. That, see, the right to choose a partner is a part of right to life in Article 21. That, see, if there are two adults, people who have the law recognizes with the ability to choose for themselves. Like once you're out, once you become an adult, attain the age of 18, you are free to choose your decisions. No one can force you. And when you have been freely chosen to be whatever, be with whosoever, no one can tell you what to do. That the state, the family, your parents, as long as you're adults and you have exercised a free choice, you are capable of choosing yourself, and the law retains that you have the right. It cannot be stated that parents can go to court and say, see, my child is stupid or my child is dumb, and they are incapable of choosing what is best for themselves. The law recognizes if you want to, then you can. And that is the concept of Article 21. That under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, individuals are free to choose for themselves. So that is the bit that becomes relevant in this entire political narrative. This order highlights those two cases that we had talked about in the op-ed. Okay, both of them also recognize, and when I had covered the topic, I had told you the case of Supreme Court of KM Joseph case which was based out of Kerala. So that case also highlights the same principle. So for a CLAT aspirant or someone who wants to aspire to be a lawyer, the constitutional rights of individuals are what you actually talk about, right? When, for example, even if you become a lawyer, you aspire to become judges, you aspire to become advocates for people. So then also the idea behind is that you uphold the constitutional rights of the people, that there are certain rights given in the constitution and it is our duty to uphold them. So that is why we have to cut across all the political narrative and arrive at the constitutionality bit. And that is exactly what the CLAT exam also wants you to find out. It wants to nurture you into thinking constitutionally, thinking about what are the real rights that you can uphold, and talk about all of that. Okay, so this is the principle that under right to choose a partner is part of right to life, is what High Court has stated. That is it with regards to this news for us. Now coming to a doubt that a lot of students had yesterday, that so banks are of two types, public sector banks and private sector banks. We had discussed the case of RC Cooper bank nationalization when Indira Gandhi announced that a host of banks will be converted to public sector banks. What is a public sector bank? A public sector bank is the one that is managed and controlled. What do I mean by manage and control? Management means people who make the decisions of the bank, the MDs, bank managers, who appoints them, who controls, who can appoint these people, the employees. So that is management. Control, who has absolute control, what are the decisions that banks take, who controls them. When it is the question of a public sector bank, the state decides that. Okay, what is a state? A state, definition of a state is stated as something in the Article 21. Now this link of state and Article 12 is something that you will study in your law schools. Okay, that is not relevant for CLAT perspective. What you need to know is that, see, a public sector bank is something that is managed and controlled by the state. State is something that the government, central government basically, or the state government, cooperative banks. Okay, and why are they considered state or public? So this is controlled by state, but why do we call them public sector banks or not like state controlled banks? Because what is state? State is formed by the people, right? How does state rule? Where does the state get the money to have the finances to establish a bank, open all this? From our taxes, right? We pay taxes, then the government has certain facilities to provide, it has capital, then only it will able to appoint people for banking operations, open banks, open new branches, and that is how our tax money controls these public sector banks. And then is our choice. We choose the state, right? People decide that the state will rule us or that state will manage certain affairs. That is why they are called public sector banks. Okay. And what is a private sector bank? A private sector bank is something that is controlled by individuals or a group of people. Like for example, the Soft Bank or HDFC, ICICI, they are not controlled by the state. There is no state body that controls them. Our tax money is not that governs them. It is the wealth of certain individuals that controls it, right? So that is how they are private banks. Banks that have been established and run by individuals, normal people. When I, for example, use my wealth to establish a bank, I will open a private sector bank, not a public sector. I am not a state, right? All of us are not state, but when we choose a government, that is the state that governs. So they become public sector bank. Now, how do you determine what is the management and control level? Who can make the decisions for the bank? Now, how do you arrive at this threshold that the state is controlling and managing this bank? Is this number 50% plus 1. 50% is half and plus 1. So when you have more than 50% of the control or shares or decision making, then you can say the state controls this bank. Okay. So this is the idea that, for example, if a bank is ownership value is 100 or 100 shares, okay, and the government of India has 51, okay, then we can say that government of India controls this bank. So this becomes a public sector bank. This is the threshold. Now, yesterday there was concept of disinvestment and privatization. When government decides to, let's say, give up its 51% and say it will only control now 20% of the share and says reduces its holding by 31%. Who gets it? Probably private people. Individuals will get these shares. So then the control of the bank is not with the government anymore. It is not a majority shareholder. Shares the total value. So when the state gives up something that is its own, okay, that process is known as disinvestment or privatization. That is the entire idea. I hope you understood all of this. Okay, now remember the question that I've given you with regards to which is the country that has given the name Nivar for the cyclone. Put that down in the comment section. I will follow it and cover the story tomorrow. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and share it further. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss the update for tomorrow. Thank you so much.